My name is Hannah Grace Miller. I was 17 years old when everything I thought I knew about life ended in a single morning. It was November 5th, 2017, a Sunday that began like all the others. I never imagined it would be the day I would die. I grew up in a small town where everyone knew each other's names. My father worked long hours, and my mother poured her life into teaching little children. To most people, I was just an ordinary girl, someone who worried about exams, played music at youth group, and sometimes rolled her eyes when Mom reminded me to dress properly for church. But deep in my heart, I knew church was more than a routine. It was the place where my faith had slowly taken root, the place where I first whispered prayers when I felt unseen and weak. That Sunday, I sat quietly in my usual spot, my Bible open but my thoughts wandering. I remember feeling restless, as if something invisible was pressing on my chest. The pastor had just started preaching about loving our enemies when the sound of gunfire shattered the sanctuary. Chaos erupted around me. I froze for a moment, unable to move, as screams and cries filled the air. Then it happened. The sharp pain, the burning shock. 2 bullets struck my back, and I collapsed onto the wooden floor. My body trembled, my vision blurred, and I heard my mother's voice calling my name. Fear rushed in like a flood, but strangely, another current was rising stronger than fear. It was faith, the memory of all the times I had whispered, "Jesus, I trust you." As the world dimmed around me, I felt myself loosening, as though the weight of pain and confusion was slipping away. I realized I was leaving the life I had known. I wasn't clinging to the pews or the stained glass anymore. I was clinging to the name I had always believed in. I died on that floor, but even in the moment of dying, there was a strange certainty, a knowing that Jesus was near, that I was not stepping into darkness but into his arms. I used to think my life was small, almost invisible compared to the bigger world beyond our little town. My father worked at the local hardware store, fixing things and chatting with customers who had known him since he was a boy. My mother devoted her days to teaching second graders, pouring patience and kindness into children who sometimes had no one else to believe in them. We didn't have much, but we had each other. Our home was a simple white house with a porch that creaked in the summer heat. It was the kind of place people might drive past without noticing, but to me, it was the center of my world. I remember sitting on that porch, watching the seasons change, and whispering prayers that I barely understood at the time. And there was Daisy, my golden retriever, who would curl up beside me whenever I felt lonely, as if she knew when I needed comfort the most. I wasn't extraordinary by anyone's standards. My grades were decent, I sang with the youth choir, and sometimes I struggled with doubts about who I was and what God really wanted from me. But I also knew there was a quiet thread weaving through everything, faith. Not the loud, dramatic kind, but the gentle, steady belief that even in the ordinariness of my life, God was present. Looking back now, I realize how much that simplicity shaped me. My parents didn't preach long sermons at home. Instead, they lived faith in the way they forgave quickly, in the way they prayed over meals, in the way they loved me even when I failed. That was my first gospel, the living example of grace in a small house on a quiet street. So when death came crashing into my Sunday morning, I wasn't prepared in my own strength. I was prepared by years of hidden prayers, quiet lessons, and the kind of love that doesn't need attention. I didn't know it then, but everything ordinary about me was already being shaped for something eternal. Most Sundays felt the same to me. I would complain about having to wear a skirt that felt too formal or shoes that pinched, and I'd roll my eyes when my mom reminded me not to be late. But beneath all the little protests, I carried a deep love for that small church. It wasn't just a building with wooden pews. It was the place where my faith was fed week after week. Every hymn we sang, every whispered prayer, every smile from the elders who had watched me grow, they shaped something inside me. I knew that no matter how restless I felt as a teenager, the church was a family I belonged to. When I walked through those doors, I felt a quiet safety, as if the walls themselves held stories of God's faithfulness. Even in moments when I doubted or felt distant, there was always a tug in my heart reminding me that this was home. The church had carried me through seasons of loneliness, through teenage struggles, through nights when I wasn't sure who I was. And though I might not have admitted it then, I was grateful. Because every time I sat in that fourth row pew, I felt closer to the God who saw me completely. So when chaos shattered that sanctuary, I realized just how much it meant to me. My love for that little church wasn't about tradition or habit. It was about the presence of God that filled it, the bond of faith that tied us together. And even as darkness rushed in, that truth anchored me. If you are reading this, remember, faith is not about perfection or appearances. It's about belonging to a God who never leaves you, even when fear surrounds you. And just like I found safety in that small church, you too can find safety in His arms. Comment, Amen, below if you believe that God is your refuge and you want His protection over your life. That morning felt ordinary, almost too ordinary. I was texting a friend about meeting after church, my mind split between faith and the small distractions of being 17. I sat in the fourth row, the same place I always chose, directly behind the Johnson family. Little Emma, their daughter, had her usual smile. She always turned around during the hymns just to wave at me, her joy so pure it could soften even my most restless days. As the pastor began to preach about loving our enemies, I remember thinking how strange and difficult that command felt. Love those who hurt you. Love those who seem impossible to forgive. My heart wrestled with those words, even as the sanctuary filled with voices. And then, without warning, the sound that would change everything split the air. The first shot rang out, then another. The service became chaos in an instant. Screams, running, bodies dropping to the floor. My pulse pounded, my mind racing. Yet through the terror, my eyes caught Emma's. She was frozen, her small hand gripping her mother's sleeve. Something inside me stirred stronger than fear. It wasn't calculation, it wasn't courage I had practiced. It was a sudden knowing, a voice deeper than my own, reminding me that faith means stepping forward even when every instinct tells you to run. I thought of Emma, of the children, of my parents just a few seats away. And in that moment, the decision was no decision at all. I rose to my feet, heart trembling but spirit steady. I didn't move away from danger, I moved toward it. My body shook, but my soul whispered the prayer I had prayed all my life. Jesus, I trust you. That trust became my anchor as the storm of violence crashed through the sanctuary. The words of the pastor about loving our enemies were still echoing in my heart when the first shot exploded. For a moment, it felt unreal, as if the sound could not possibly belong inside a sanctuary. But then screams pierced the air, and the truth came crashing down. A man dressed in black stormed through the aisle, his weapon raised. I saw families duck under pews, mothers shielding their babies, elders collapsing under the sudden fire. The church that had always felt like home now shook with terror. Children cried out in voices that will never leave my memory. I froze. Fear clawed at my chest, heavy and suffocating. But in that fear, something else broke through, a voice within, quiet yet stronger than the chaos around me. Do not be afraid, I am with you. I clung to that whisper. Even as I saw people I loved fall, even as I tasted panic on my lips, I knew Jesus was present in the middle of the storm. My eyes searched the room, and I saw faith alive and trembling hands lifted to shield others, in desperate prayers shouted into the noise, in the sacrifice of love that people made in their final breaths. The horror was undeniable, but so was the presence of God. And in that moment, I realized faith isn't tested when life is safe. It's proven when everything is falling apart. I whispered inside my heart, Lord, if I must fall, let me fall into your arms. The chaos continued, but my spirit anchored to that prayer. I don't remember deciding. It was like something inside me moved before my body had time to think. Instead of running for safety, my feet carried me forward, straight toward the danger. I wasn't a hero. I was just a girl who saw children frozen in terror and knew I couldn't stand still. The first bullet tore into my shoulder. The impact spun me sideways, pain exploding like fire. Before I could catch my breath, the second one struck my back. My body collapsed hard onto the wooden floor. The air rushed out of my lungs, and a metallic taste filled my mouth. Everything blurred. The screams around me grew distant, muffled, like echoes fading into the background. I felt my strength slipping away, consciousness draining drop by drop. My hands trembled as I tried to move, but nothing obeyed me. And yet, in the middle of the pain, there was a strange calm. My last sensation wasn't terror, it was surrender. I remembered the verse I had underlined so many times in my Bible. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Those words weren't just ink on a page anymore. They were alive inside me, wrapping around me like a promise that could not be broken. My mother's voice screamed my name somewhere behind me, but it was growing faint. The world dimmed, but another light was beginning to shine. It was not from the church windows, not from anything earthly. It was warm, steady, and calling me upward. And in that moment, as life slipped from my body, I realized death was not the end. It was the doorway into the arms of the one I had trusted all along. The moment my body collapsed, I thought it was the end. But then something unexplainable happened. I was no longer bound to the floor. I felt myself rising, weightless, as if gravity itself had let me go. Below me, I could see the church, the chaos, the cries, my own body lying motionless in a pool of blood. My parents knelt beside me, my mother clutching my hand, my father pressing against the wound, desperate to keep me here. And yet, I felt no pain, no fear. Only peace. It was strange, almost like watching a scene from far away, yet knowing it was still my story. The panic of the people below could not touch me anymore. A warmth began to surround me, a golden glow that grew stronger with every heartbeat I no longer had. It wasn't the sun. It wasn't a trick of my mind. It was something alive, something holy. The light pulled me upward, tender but irresistible, like arms I had longed for all my life. The closer I drew to it, the more alive I felt. For the first time, I understood what it meant to be truly awake. And then, through the brilliance, I saw him. Jesus. No painting, no story, no childhood imagination could have prepared me for that moment. He stood before me, not distant but near, so real that everything else faded away. His presence was overwhelming, yet comforting. His eyes looked into me as if he had known every thought, every mistake, every hidden cry of my heart. And still, what poured out of them was love. A love so deep, so complete, that I broke down in tears. When he spoke my name, it wasn't just sound. It was life. His voice flowed through me like warm honey, filling every empty place I had ever carried. I knew then I was finally home. As I stood before him, my tears wouldn't stop. I felt like a child who had carried too much weight for far too long. Then Jesus reached out his hand and gently touched my face. The moment his palm rested against my skin, waves of love surged through me. It wasn't just an emotion. It was like liquid light flowing through every part of who I was. All shame, all fear, all pain melted away. He looked straight into my eyes and said, "My brave daughter." His words pierced deeper than any wound I had suffered. They didn't just affirm what I had done in that moment of chaos, they revealed who I was in his sight. For the first time, I realized that courage is not the absence of fear but the presence of love strong enough to act in spite of it. Then his voice grew tender yet powerful. "You saved 12 lives today. Your courage kept the enemy from reaching the children." I gasped, stunned. I hadn't even thought of it that way. I only remembered the terror, the running, the sound of bullets. But Jesus saw the eternal weight of those seconds. He showed me how even one act of faith can ripple beyond what the human eye can measure. I broke down again, not from pride but from awe. I never knew that my simple decision, to step forward instead of turning away, could matter so much in eternity. Jesus smiled with such gentleness that it felt like the sunrise was shining only for me. At that moment I understood. He does not measure us by the size of our strength, but by the willingness of our hearts. And even in our smallest steps of faith, his power is revealed. If you believe that Jesus can turn even your smallest act of faith into something eternal, comment "Amen" below and trust him to be your protector. After the warmth of his embrace, I thought nothing could shake the peace that surrounded me. But then Jesus' expression grew solemn. He took my hand, and suddenly the golden light faded. The atmosphere around us shifted, heavy and suffocating. I found myself standing at the edge of a place so dark that words fail to describe it. The air itself felt wrong, thick, choking, filled with despair. In the distance, I heard cries, screams that pierced deeper than any wound. A stench of death and burning hung all around. My heart trembled. This was not just emptiness, it was torment. Jesus pointed, and I saw them, countless souls, trapped in a pit of endless night. their faces twisted with regret and agony. Among them, I recognized the man who had pulled the trigger that ended my earthly life. He was screaming, but it wasn't only from pain. His eyes revealed a realization more unbearable than the fire. He finally understood what he had done. Every life stolen, every child terrified, every family broken, the weight of it all pressed down on him without end. Jesus' voice broke the silence. This is where hatred leads. This is the consequence of rejecting love, of silencing my voice. His tone was filled not with anger but with sorrow, as though his heart still ached for those who had chosen this path. I watched as dark beings, demons, mocked and tormented those souls, whispering every lie they had believed, replaying every chance for forgiveness they had ignored. There was no escape, only the eternal echo of choices made against love. I turned to Jesus with tears streaming down my face. Lord, it's unbearable. Couldn't you have stopped them? He looked at me with eyes full of sorrow and said, I called to them again and again. I sent people to show them love, but love must be chosen freely. They chose rage over mercy, pride over surrender, hate over forgiveness. And this is where that path ends. As I stood trembling at the edge of that darkness, Jesus turned me gently back toward the light. His voice carried both authority and tenderness. Hannah, your time here is not finished. I am sending you back with a message. I felt my spirit ache at the thought of leaving his presence, but his words pierced deeper than my longing. Do not let fear rule my people. Do not let terror silence worship. Every time the enemy strikes, he seeks to scatter my church. But I am calling my children to stand. Keep gathering. Keep teaching your little ones. Keep lifting your voices in prayer. His eyes locked on mine, blazing with love and urgency. Evil will not go unpunished. Justice is mine, and no hand raised against my people will escape my judgment. Yet even now, even those planning violence still have a chance. While there is breath, there is mercy. I am calling them, too, calling them away from hate into my love. I could hardly breathe under the weight of those words. My heart broke with his, not only for the victims, but even for those chained in rage. His mercy was wider than I ever imagined. Then he lifted my chin, so I could not look away. Tell them, Hannah. Tell them that fear is a lie. Tell them that my house remains a refuge. Tell them to trust me more than they trust their own safety. For I am with them always. His final words burned into me like fire written on my soul. You are my witness. Do not keep silent. And in that moment, I knew my life had been spared for this very reason, to carry his message into a broken world. If you believe we must not let fear silence our faith, comment Amen below and declare your trust in Jesus' protection.